Good evening, everyone. With the quorum of members present, I will call the Public Health and Safety Committee for Monday, January 16th, 2023 to order. The first item on our agenda tonight is to approve the minutes of our last meeting from 12/19 of '22. Did anyone notice anything that they needed revised or updated in the minutes? If not, I'll take it. Go
The
ahead, Jeff.
electric scooter, it says I made the motion and seconded it.
Oh,
I looked up on the video, Doug actually seconded it.
okay. So do we have a motion then to approve the minutes with the correction on the motion and second from last month's electric scooter item?
I also make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Larson. Is there a second?
I can
Second by Denny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed. Minutes are approved. Item 2 is consider approval or denial of various license applications. We have one recommended for denial this evening, and by our ordinance, we do allow applicants recommended for denial to come and address the committee and talk through their situation and present evidence of rehabilitation if it so exists. The denial is for Elizabeth Gallion as a public transport driver. Is Elizabeth Gallion with us this evening? Elizabeth Gallion? Okay, we'll let the record show that she has not appeared to address the committee, so that license will remain in the batch. With that, we also have a host of seasonal events that most of which we approve every year that you can see from the packet. Most of Wausau area events are in there this time. And we've got a Class B beer and liquor license for a new restaurant at 515 Fulton Street that's planning to open later this spring, Salts LLC. The new owners of that establishment met with the subcommittee this afternoon immediately prior to this meeting, presented their plan of operation, and that subcommittee recommended unanimously that the recommendation that we approve that license. So they'll be undertaking some remodeling of the establishment, and then once they're ready to open, they would be granted that license then. Does anyone have any questions on events or on anything that you see in the licensing item for this month? Go ahead, Doug.
So that's just Trace Hermanos?
Trace Hermanos is actually relocating their restaurant to one of their other buildings. And so their building will come available, and then this other restaurant would like to move in there after some renovation. Any additional questions on that? If not, I'll accept a motion to accept or deny licenses as recommended by staff.
I'll make the motion.
A motion from Henke. Is there a second? Second from Denny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? None are opposed, so those licenses are approved or denied as per the recommendation. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action regarding adoption of the Marathon County All Hazards Mitigation Plan 2022 update. These next two items actually are things that we approve every so often on a cyclical basis. I believe they allow for emergency management response and those type of things. It looks like there's copies of the prior paperwork in the packets. Does anyone have questions on these items at all? If not, is there a motion to approve adoption of the Marathon County All Hazards Mitigation Plan update?
Make the motion.
Okay, motion from Larson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Henke. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Same deal with this. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action regarding the adoption of the National Incident Management System. And that really involves emergency management and large-scale event management. And so we periodically adopt that as well. Any questions on that? If not, is there a motion to approve that item? Motion by McElhaney. Is there a second? Second by Denny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Item 5, is a lot of reading for a simple item. So we'll go through item 5 is discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending section 8.08.001 definitions, section 8.08.120 number of dogs and cats limited, section 8.08.270 penalty, creating section 8.08.171 permitting of commercial kennels, section 8.08.172 commercial kennel permit fees, section 8.08.173 permit application process, section 8.08.174 general permit provisions, section 8.08.175 permit non-renewal, suspension, or revocation, section 8.08.176 abatement of nuisance at commercial kennel, section 8.08.177 general facility standards, section 8.08.178 indoor facility standards, section 8.08.179 outdoor facility standards, section 8.08.180 enclosures, and section 8.08.181 feeding and food receptacles. And so you'll recall last month we started with some discussion of this, and we had asked for some adjustments, and now Nate's got those for us, so.
Yeah, so last time we met, we talked about mainly this, that was a pretty substantial ordinance. We made some other adjustments just based on talking more with Ashley as she, delved further and further into this. So at this time now, we have added that one of the conditions of granting the license or the permit would be to have a certain insurance policy. We put that as a liability of $1 million for property damage, just in personal injury inflicted by the negligence of the business or any of its agents. We would be named as a co-insured just for the purposes of notice of cancellation of that policy, because they need to have that in effect during the whole year for the permit. It's very similar to our dangerous dog insurance requirement.
Additional insured, right?
As additional insured, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yep. That makes sense.
Let's see. Then we also then talked about, or I was talking with Ashley that there's one kennel that already exists in Wausau and what they do, and we like that idea. So they require that their clients provide proof of a rabies vaccination as well as proof of a negative Giardia test, which is a bacteria in the fecal, and she just wants that also just to make sure that she's not bringing in sick dogs to get the rest of the dogs sick. We thought that was a good idea to basically, and that was on her own doing. Obviously, we don't have any requirements yet, but we just thought it was a good idea. Then the other thing we talked about was the minimum square footage per dog that the place will have. So, if they have 25 dogs, they need to have sufficient space for those 25 dogs. So Ashley did some looking, and we have determined that to be about 14 square feet per dog. We kind of just took an average because obviously a little dog needs less than a big dog, but 14 was about an average, and so we put that as for the space requirement for an indoor and an outdoor facility.
Okay.
We did make the Marathon County Humane Society exempt from that, basically because we're contracted with them and they have to take the dogs for various reasons. They're not taking the dogs as a daycare facility.
Right.
It's a different situation of why then they're taking the dogs. So
Right.
we wanted to make sure that they were exempt from that because.
Well, and it's not voluntary boarding either.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep. So that's really about it then for the additions that I made.
Okay, and then I see we've got the fee structure set up for first, second, and third violation with progressively higher amounts, which makes sense with what we do with other things.
Yep.
Or when you have to keep going back and expending resources to verify compliance, that the fine gets a little worse each time if they don't self-correct on the first notice. So-
Correct. And then we also then have, the revocation, suspension, non-renewal procedure then as well. And so that would all then play into that.
Okay.
So they do get a couple of tries before we would have to get to that point.
Sure, but we have the conduit in here to do that if it would be needed anyway, as far as the hearing stuff, so.
Yep.
Anybody have any questions then for Nate on this version of the agreement? It looks like they've built in a lot of the stuff that Ashley indicated that she would like to see in here as far as applicability and provisions. Go ahead,
I
Doug.
do have a question. How does this dovetail with our with people feeding feral cats in their garage. Apparently, there's a,
This has nothing to do with that. This is specifically for a commercial business to basically run a doggy daycare.
okay.
So yeah.
Well, then there's one other item on here that a question is hunting is listed. Can you explain that one?
Where is that at? I don't,
Commercial kennel. It,
The highlighted section,
in the highlighted section on page 21.
In the definition?
Right.
8.0, 8.001 definition.
Oh, so if they were training hunting dogs, you mean? Commercial kennel means a pack or collection of dogs or cats on a single commercial premises where animals are maintained for boarding, daycare, grooming, training, hunting, or any other commercial premise except for the sale or breeding of animals as otherwise provided by law. So,
yeah, I suppose hunting, the comma there is supposed to be like training of a hunting dog, not actually then having a pack of dogs to go hunt with. I'm hoping the businesses aren't taking dogs out hunting. I mean, I know people do that, but that's not, they're supposed to be probably doing that on their own. I could get rid of that comma in between training of a hunting. Well, training and then training of hunting dogs. Maybe that's what I should
so
more
grooming,
clarify.
training, including training for hunting? Is
Yeah,
that what we-
something like that.
Something like that to clarify? Because there are places that include, that train bird dogs and things.
I think that's necessary to kind of just
To clarify?
clarify and have all your i's dotted and your t's crossed
Okay.
to cover your butt, so to speak.
Sure, yeah, totally. So, because if there's a loophole, people might find it, so we want to be clear on the front end with this stuff, so. Okay, so with that technical change that we made to the definition of commercial kennel, so in between grooming, training, and then we would insert including training for hunting, for the purpose of hunting, then is there a motion to approve this draft with that revision?
I also make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Larson, is there a second?
A second.
Second by Denny. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries as well. Item number 6, discussion and possible action regarding authorizing the amendment of fees to the City of Wausau fees and licenses schedule adopted pursuant to Wausau Municipal Code, Section 3.040.010, Sub A, relating to commercial kennel permit fees. And so this is the fee for the permit that we would give the folks that we just approved in our last item. Does anybody have questions on that at all? That same structure should be built in there that we saw with the progressive fee. Is there a
Well,
motion?
This is just for the permit fee.
Oh, the permit fee.
Not the penalty.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And so we were gonna, I think our intention last month was to mirror the permit fee to match other municipalities that are issuing kennel fees, correct?
Correct, yeah, and so the $100 is
Yep.
from everywhere around here is 100, so I.
Right, which then brings consistency to Ashley's application of these things, because she's also serving Weston, so. Okay,
I'll make the motion, we
approve?
approve this.
Okay, motion from Larson to approve, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Henke, additional discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that passes as well. Item number 7 is discussion and possible action amending section 1.01.025, issuance of citations, repealing section 2.20.045, enforcement of certain property violations. So, a number of years ago, when we were working on our, I think we were in the midst of working with our Housing Blight Task Force, we were starting to look at what the most commonly issued inspection violations were. Things for like vehicle parked in the wrong space or camper in the wrong spot that's not on pavement and garbage cans left out and some of these minor things. And at that point, the suggestion was made that we should create the conduit for our inspection staff to be able to immediately ticket those folks. And that the ticket would be the education, not a letter that says, you know, hey, pull in your garbage cans or move your camper. And so we created this conduit where they could issue immediate tickets if they wanted to for violations. And the person just got the fine, and that's what they were stuck with. There was no opportunity to self-correct. I think what they found, though, through that process, and even before they enacted it, was that when they sent out a letter to a homeowner asking for compliance on certain things, a large number of the people they contact self-correct on either the first or second visit, most often the first visit. And so I don't know that they've ever issued one of these citations. So Bill Hebert was going through some of the things that they have in their toolbox and decided that this was really little used and is actually asking us to get rid of it because it really doesn't give people, I mean, often people aren't all from here, they're new residents, they've recently relocated to the city, they may not be aware of a particular ordinance. So to be met with an immediate citation isn't very welcoming as a community, where if you send that person a notice and say, you can't park this there, or you need to remove this item and you've got 5 days to do it, that generates the same type of correction, but not necessarily with an immediate negative touch, I guess, if that makes sense. So, the immediate citation stuff just hasn't been used, according to Bill. Do you have anything else on that, Nate?
I mean, basically, they didn't use it because it was actually more work for them, even though it was an instant ticket. I also my skin crawls just thinking about it, because, it's basically a parking ticket, but parking tickets are a little different. Whereas the whole not having really due process or a chance to self-correct or to correct at all, I just didn't like it at all. So
Well, it
the
might
fact that
be-
they never use it, they don't like using it, and we already have a pretty good established route of, writing letters and then writing a citation and then potentially doing a summons and complaint. So,
Well, and often even prior to the letter, when they were started out at the onset of this, is the inspection staff also indicated that, if there was a situation that maybe needed more immediate attention, and if they could tell that the people were home, that they also had the ability to go up and knock on the door and talk to the person and say, hey, this is the situation we see. And I think they did some of that in lieu of this even, rather than these immediate ticket things. But I think there were some concerns in the committee when we enacted it as well about, due process, and then what happens when someone challenges one of these immediate citation type things. There's no appeal process for this, and then you sit with an unpaid ticket. So it got a mixed reaction when it came out in the first place, I guess is what I would say. Becky?
I'm all for giving people a chance, but I guess I need to express to the committee that I have gotten a lot of feedback from my residents that sometimes their letter, come back 2 weeks, another letter, go back a third time a month later. These sometimes, and I've gone to Bill numerous times, I've copied in the mayor, this is my only fear is this isn't working and I'm not for this, but do we need to look at, maybe shortening up this thing? People that aren't self-correcting are not self-correcting. And I get call after call after call, email, how long, it takes a whole summer to get somebody to do, to cut a grass or do that because we're going to do this and we're going to come back 3 weeks and then we're going to do it another letter. And then the letter takes 2 weeks, so we're going to give them, that is just my only concern, and it's really outside of this, but I think we need to look, and Bill knows who these people, they're chronic people, but I'm getting a lot of pushback and complaints about, I follow the rules, why don't other people have to, they don't mind a letter going out, but self-correction is not happening. And it is a long, long process.
And that's maybe something that they could look at internally as far as how long the window of compliance is. And so, I had just talked to Bill recently about something comparable where we had something going on that was in violation of the zoning, but he actually allowed a little longer window of opportunity because the owner had to notify the tenant that they not only had to stop the activity, but perhaps vacate the lease if they were unwilling to stop the activity. So that particular one, he gave like 4 weeks. But, there's other things where, we see, like, we get copies of some of those letters and, it says sometimes we'll be back in 5 days. And they're good about going back in the 5 days. They don't wait a month, but other things, they give a little more time. And one of the comments that I had gotten from them when I first started, because I had the same argument that you had, and that's kind of how this ticket thing started in the first place, was, if the ticket was the education, and that seemed like a really heavy-handed approach first, but, I think they kind of watch too, like what season we're in. So if people have to do, outdoor work, they obviously can't do it now. They give them a little slack till the weather is cooperative. So, Lou?
So if we pass this, does that mean that the ticket thing is gone?
The immediate ticket thing, they can still issue a citation and a summons and complaint to them through their normal
A
process.
citation, meaning there's no fine or
No,
anything in
so-
that citation?
So the,
They still get a fine.
so the ticket was like a $30 ticket, and it was kind of like a parking ticket is how it was. So view it as that. So say they put their vehicle on their front yard, we're not supposed to do.
Sure.
Instead of sending a letter, hey, you get it off, okay, you didn't do it after 2 weeks, now we're gonna write you a citation, which is $124. The ticket is just, hey, it's there, I'm not even gonna talk to you, it's a violation per se.
Okay.
And here's your $30 ticket. So that's what we're getting rid of, and we're going just to the citation mode.
Okay.
Does that answer?
Yeah, because
Okay.
Becky kind of took the words right out of my mouth. I've got some chronic violators too that, I don't really think that the city should offer any extension to these people or, so I think that the
I
more.
think we all have the few, we all have a few, but there's, oddly enough, the citation that would follow the letter is like quadruple expensive compared to the immediate citation, which, they didn't use it they didn't use it at all,
Well,
but,
good, and so long
you know.
as that's in place, I would be for this then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So to answer, I guess, maybe your and Becky's, or Lou and Becky's question or comments, concerns about what is the city doing? So, a lot, but it's not a quick process, and I wish we could make it faster. So usually how it goes is there's a violation, they send their letter, then they send their follow-up letter, and then they get a citation. The problem with the chronic people is then they don't show up. Okay, now we got to start over. So we send them a letter, and then we do a summons and complaint. Okay, now they get a court date. That's in a while. Okay, now they show up for their initial appearance, and we have a pretrial. If they don't show up, then it's defaulted, which is at $124 times the number of days that the violation has been there times the number of violations that are present at that time. So they default, it can be a very large number. That's usually then when they get panicked, because if all of a sudden they get a bill for, $150,000 that we just registered against their property, everybody's gonna cry. And those also then show up on a title search when they go to sell their vehicle or sell their house. If they do show up, we usually then, depending on what time of the year it is, what their project is, how involved it is, we kind of sit down with the inspector, myself, and the property owner, and we come up with some sort of game plan of, okay, how long do you need to realistically get this done so we don't have to come back here because of the larger amount of fine with the summons and complaint? Usually they get it done in time, or if they're making good progress, we give them an extension because they're communicating with the inspector, they're making progress. If they don't, then I won't move the date. And we have the hearing or the trial, and then they usually lose because, again, it's a property violation. It's either there or it's not. If we still then, they default, they don't show up, they still have the outstanding issue, then we start looking into abatement of removing the violation, or if it's, a bad structure, then we start looking into raising the building. To do the abatement, we need a warrant from the circuit court judge. That takes a little bit to draft and then have them approved, and then once that's, I guess, okayed, DPW then is involved. The problem is they're busy depending on what type of the year it is as well. And then obviously then they have to send out their crew to then take care of that. So it's then a scheduling of that. If we're going to raise the building, the city needs to front that cost to do that. And depending on the size of the building and what they're raising, it can get expensive. I mean, we raised, it's our clubhouse, and they had to rent a big claw machine, I don't know what its name, and they had to rent that, and that was there for multiple days, I think even a week. And so, I mean, it's not cheap. And so again, it's trying to then figure out who's going to front that cost. Obviously, it then gets assessed as a special charge against the property tax, but we have to still front the cost. And so if we had an unlimited budget, we have a 4-page document of all the problem properties that are in Wausau, and a lot of those are probably raisable buildings. But again, it just comes down to time and money. So there are a lot of things that we are doing, but we can only do so much because of one, time and money, and then also just notice and due processes, obviously, here. So I do hear your concerns. I feel like I'm in the inspections office multiple times every day trying to figure something out. We have our problem property meeting that we meet, I don't know, every couple of months. And that's what we do. It's fire, police, inspections, and myself, and we just go through all the houses in Wausau, and it's a lot.
Are they issuing nuisance declarations on those as well?
Yeah, there have been.
Okay, because that's a key tool as well, when it starts to eat up an awful lot of service time and,
Yeah.
and resources, so.
But again, the only things that really take care of the problem is the abatement or the raise.
Yeah.
But that's a long process. For the grass cutting, we just changed this year because before, we would have, I think Revi would go out and cut it. But the problem is that if Revi shows up to cut it, and then the people have already cut it, just an hour before they got there, well, no, we still need to pay Revive, but the property owner actually already cut it, and so then the city has to eat that cost. So this year was the first year that we stopped doing that, and then we just issued the citations, which then doesn't solve the problem. It's still there. So you can't win either way. So that's where we're at with
And
that.
they had a contract for hand mowing services, and they were getting them pretty, same thing with sidewalk shoveling. Hopefully they're still doing that, but go ahead, Becky.
I guess, my issue, and again, this is probably a conversation for another day, but and I get that inspections want to have some leeway on what they do, but I don't know if anybody else, but I get calls, we have to do this, and then they give, the inspector gave this guy, 6 weeks to move his trailer. The next guy doesn't get that, and I get nailed about that. How come you did that and not here? So that's the inequity I see, and that's with the letters and things like that, where somebody has something parked for most of the summer because, we sent a letter and then we didn't get back and it was still there. Then we gave them 6 weeks, and that is my issue, is that if we're going to do something, let's do it for everyone. I get that we want to work with people, but I have to answer to people that say, I had to move this in this, this amount of time. Why did this person get 6 weeks? Or why is it taking the city so long? Why is it taking so long? And I go back to Bill, that's where I need to, I guess if we're going to have ordinances, it should be black and white. And you want to
Like
give people.
everybody gets 10 days, or everybody gets 5, or
whatever,
everybody,
but we can't, unless there's really, really bad, some circumstance that could be explained, but just because I talked to him and he was a nice guy and I thought, I'll give you 6 weeks. That's just the feedback I've been hearing, and this year has been really, really bad on that. And I don't know how to answer that of why, I can state policy, but if it's being manipulated.
Well, and sometimes it helps, I think, if there's mitigating circumstances that require an extension, it would be good to have some sort of, file documentation as to why the 6 weeks versus the 10 days or whatever. I mean, not that we need to be provided it, but as long as they have it, so when they're asked, what was the mitigating circumstance that took place, and, they need to have a good answer for that too, which I'm sure they do, but, what the record keeping looks like, I guess I'd be interested in. But this, Bill identified this early on as being not used and not effective. So I think they're looking to get rid of this and then, better use the other tools that still exist. With that, we had a motion and a second on the floor to repeal this and remove this tool. Any additional discussion or questions on it at all? If not, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes unanimously, and that item then carries. Let's see, that gives us item number 8, which is the operations report from the fire department for the month of December. And so we've got Deputy Chief Kopp with us. If you want to walk us through some key things, you have anything you want to talk about on the report this month?
Yeah, typical monthly report. If you guys had any questions, I'd be willing to answer them. You can expect the annual report to come out next month to all of you, recapping 2022. And since we're in January, it's a transitional year for us. A lot of new things happening at the fire department. It's going to be exciting 12 months ahead starting now. So looking
A lot of new
forward to-
faces?
Exactly. A lot of new faces starting next month already, 13 in February. So always willing to entertain any ideas or questions, so.
Okay. Does anybody have questions or anything about the report? If not, we'll place their report on file. Then we've got, let's see here, item number 9 is the Wausau PD 2022 fourth quarter operations report and the tavern activities report for the month of December. Anything on that report, Chief, that you wanted to talk about specifically?
Yeah, I'll just identify a few of the things that I put in my initial message page. I've talked previously at the committee in regards to our staffing levels and being understaffed as a result of a number of officers being in training, field training, and in and our recruitment process. So right now we have 5 officers that are in field training currently, and then we have 5 more that will be beginning recruit school next week. So we're essentially down 10 officers in our 40, a little over 40 officer patrol bureau, so that's about a quarter of our staff. So it really has caused a strain on our team, specifically our patrol team. So they're not able to get off nearly as much as they want, and they're working a lot of overtime. So just wanted to identify that. We're working to shore that up, and I think the contract negotiations that settled recently will assist us in our both in our retention and in our recruitment. So I appreciate all the efforts of our council members in that regard. You'll see in our investigative bureau report, we had 36 total responses to drug overdoses in 2022, which is 4 less, about a 10% reduction from 2021. 9 of those overdoses were fatal. 12 of them were fatal in 2021, so a reduction in fatal overdoses as well. We've talked to this committee in years past about special events and charging for security at special events. So Lieutenant Jill Kurtzals provides that information to this quarterly report each quarter, and you'll see in this report the fourth quarter costs. But if you tally the costs for both on-duty and off-duty staff for all events that we provided security for in 2022. That total cost is a little over $57,000 in time. And that does not include our planning time for our lieutenants and captains that are involved in the planning of the staffing of those events. And so that's just information for policy decisions that you folks may or may not want to make in the future, but I wanted to identify and point that out. And then the last thing is Officer Garrett Carr is working on developing a register a camera program that's modeled after a program in La Crosse. And this is essentially a voluntary program for citizens that have home security cameras to allow them to notify the police that they do in fact have security camera systems at their home, so that if we ever have if we're looking for surveillance footage or witnesses in a specific case that may be helpful, they can provide us that information. So typically in a case, if we have a serious case in a neighborhood, we would canvass the neighborhood and go door to door, knocking, asking residents if they witnessed the crime or if they have security cameras. And so this program simply allows us to execute that in a much faster, more efficient manner, and that is just knowing where the cameras exist in the community. Again, it's strictly voluntary. It doesn't give us access to anybody's cameras, and we still have to follow legal protocols, obtain warrants and subpoenas if necessary, if somebody doesn't want to give us those videos and those cameras. So it's a good program that I think should make us more effective and efficient, but you'll be hearing some about it, and I just wanted to make sure that you guys have some information about it before it comes out.
Okay. Anybody have questions on the report? Go ahead, Doug.
Sure. Chief, I have a question regarding the drug overdoses. Can you point to a particular substance that is the biggest maybe underlying factor here, and would the decrease be due to potentially awareness or we're getting something drugs off the street? And any thoughts on why we decreased this year over last year?
So to answer your first question, opiates, certainly opiates are the most significant factor for our overdoses. We did have methamphetamine fatal methamphetamine overdoses this year in Wausau, which is very uncommon, that we have not seen before, and in fact haven't seen very much around our area outside of Wausau. In regards to why the reduction, I would say it's a relatively small reduction. I don't know that we can say any one thing led to that reduction, although I will say there is more awareness and education going on in our community. We did have our community resource unit and the Marathon County Drug Task Force have made significant arrests to impact the supply of heroin into our community a couple of times during the year, and I think those likely had some impact as well.
Anything else that anyone has questions on that report? The only thing notable that stood out to me on the tavern report was that there was the one little seasonal entry, and I did have to say that I had to smile when I saw that there was a charter bus full of Santas and elves downtown. But that was, it was just timely. It was cute, though. So, and I did see that one of our media partners picked it up on their Facebook page today, too, as a little tongue-in-cheek, like, Merry Christmas type thing. So, so that did stand out on the report to me. Everything else looked fairly normal. Good to see that the establishments are the ones that are calling when they need help. When we had the subcommittee meeting just a little bit ago, we encouraged the new owner as well to do the same. Anybody have questions at all on the tavern report specifically? If not, we'll place that report on file as well, along with the operations report. And item number 10 brings us to our community outreach update, and we've got our community outreach person, Tracy Rieger, with us this evening. So Tracy, welcome back. If you want to just give us a little snapshot of how things are going.
Hi, good evening. So the numbers that I reported for December are in the packet. Excuse me, I do have one correction though, because the number from November was 193, and it does indicate in the report 220. So that was an inaccuracy on my part, and I apologize. There was a small increase in our unhoused population from November to December. And I think what we're going to see month over month is that number is going to continue to fluctuate because it depends on people coming out of incarceration. It depends on people who are maybe couch surfing and now can't be at that person's home anymore. So I think we're going to see a fluctuation like this month over month. I will also say that in the month of December, 4 additional unhoused individuals were housed with the assistance of myself and some other partnering agencies. So I think that we're making some good progress. It might not feel as a whole to the community that much is happening, but I can tell you that whether or not I'm housing some people that are straight out of the, in the elements, sleeping outside, or pulling them out of shelter to get them housed, we're still reducing that number overall. So I just want to also indicate here that our bed capacity between both shelters, that's Catholic Charities and the Salvation Army, is 53. And also in the report, I indicated a daily census where the Salvation Army was only at capacity one night in the month of December. So they had bed availability. And then Catholic Charities also reports that they had 14 nights, where they were at capacity and could not accept anyone else in. So I know that there's some controversy right now regarding the number of unhoused living outside in the elements. And this coming week, the 25th, will be interesting because it's our point in time count. And I will be going on that. And my sector is going to be that of the bridges and the islands and all the parks kind of local to the downtown area. So I think I'll be able to provide a little bit more accurate number after that point in time count is over. There's a number of reasons why people are still living outside. I mean, we've had a really mild winter, to be honest, so that's part of it. The other part, of course, is Catholic Charities is a behavioral-based shelter. The Salvation Army is a program-based shelter. So if we have individuals who are not willing to participate in either one of those shelters, their options are outside, right? So we have a number of people in our community who are unhoused, who are really faced with some significant mental health issues and AODA issues that really, really prevent them from seeking shelter indoors. So I just wanted to kind of update you on that because I know that people are like, well, we have the shelter space. Why are they not going? And for you and I, that's really hard to understand, but unfortunately they have their reasons and we can't make them go. We continue to have the same kind of challenges, which is, case management. I'm spending a fair amount of time with clients doing overall just intensive case management. So that really reduces my time to be able to spend with other unhoused people. So I've started collaborating a little bit more with North Central Healthcare, and that collaboration has shown some really positive results so far this month of December into January. So I'm kind of hoping that momentum continues, and that's all I have. So if anyone has any additional questions, I'll take
Excellent.
them.
One comment that I would make that I had offered at our last task force meeting was that when we talked about street-level case management and the fact that sometimes it's not even necessarily professional consultation that people need, is it's just trustworthy people to like get them to the appointments or help somebody move. And, you know, I had mentioned at the task force that what we really could use is a group of like semi-skilled, trustworthy volunteers that could just like help you get someone to somewhere and maybe offer that person a ride, or, you know, make sure that they got to the doctor okay, or that they got to the pharmacy okay, or whatever it was. And one of the task force members had made a note of that and said, oh, I can think of 3 people already that I've got in mind. So I think the more we have these conversations, both in the task force and out in the community, and once people start to realize like what the needs really are, like what do we need people doing? You know, maybe we'll see that help starts to gel a little bit too out in the community. Becky, you had a question?
Yeah, it goes back to the shelter, the warming shelter, and, you know, their rules. I guess, could you elaborate publicly about, number one, their rules, and number two, I'd like you to publicly address some of the comments that people were turned away during that Christmas weekend when it was cold. I just think that we need kind of a public comment on that.
Sure. So the first part, excuse me, your first question was related to what the shelter's roles are. And I can speak really publicly about Catholic Charities because I used to be part of that, so I understand. They are behavioral based. So there is a strike system put in place. There's a set of rules that when a guest comes in on intake, they review that with the person doing their intake packet, and they sign off on those rules. The rules are really, really pretty simple. You know, they indicate no weapons, no drugs. You know, they have to store their things in a bin overnight. You know, be respectful of each other as guests and staff and volunteers. And some people just can't seem to get a handle on that. Whether, you know, they had a bad day, they were using, they came in and, you know, they had something to do with somebody else in the shelter and their behavior got them kicked out. They do have a 3-strike policy. It's 10 days out for the first strike, 10 days out for the second, and 30 days out for the third. However, if the weather is cold, meaning 15 degrees or below, Catholic Charities will raise that strike for the evening and allow them shelter. So I do want to speak publicly to that because I know that there's been people that have said that they get turned away because they have a strike. On cold nights, that will never be the case. If they get turned away on a cold night, there is a process put in place with the Salvation Army. And Mark, the warming center coordinator, actually updated me on that. And the process is that Catholic Charities will contact the Salvation Army, and they will see if the Salvation Army has any bed space. If so, then there's a process to get that person moved over. Catholic Charities will also take the initiative and make any contact with any other person, whether that's a friend, a relative, somebody that this person knows, to see if they can go stay with that person for the night. The Salvation Army, they have a different subset of rules. I can't really speak publicly because I don't know the rules inside and out, except for they are a 90-day program-based shelter, and they have some expectations that are different than Catholic Charities. Both shelters are considered low barrier, but with Catholic Charities, clients are able to stay there if they're sex offenders. If they've been using, then they come in intoxicated or altered in some way. As long as they're able to self-care and be safe, they can stay. Sorry, I missed your second question. What was it? I forgot what you asked me.
Christmas.
Oh, Christmas. Okay, so I'm looking at the daily census, and during the Christmas holiday, neither shelter was at capacity. So I really, I would say that is not accurate, and I can accurately tell you based on the numbers that I receive from both shelters respectively that was not the case.
I can too. I mean, I guess I needed it publicly stated because there have been media reports that it was full. I was up to date. I talked to the police the 22nd, the 23rd, the 24th. I was in constant contact with the mayor, and there was room at the shelter. Actually, the second night, I think the 23rd, there was only 17 people there. So, you know, we've heard that it was full and they were turning people away. I mean, I just want people to understand in the public that, you know, get the facts. I understand that it's a very, you know, charged situation. And I absolutely understand that. But you know, and I made it very clear at the council meeting, and I do that again. There's nobody that doesn't care. There's no one on this council that doesn't care. And those constant comments are just ridiculous. You know, we're not going to wave a magic wand. You've been in this for a long time. This isn't your first rodeo, right?
Correct.
You know, I've been in human services a long time too. You don't wave a magic wand. If we could come together and find one thing that would solve it, there were people way before us that would have done so. You know, it's a multifaceted thing. I think that we have done things. We have put you, which you are seeing success. You know, maybe there are gaps that we can look at. That's certainly, we're never going to stop looking, but it's not going to be a silver bullet for any of this. And I think that facts are really, really important, and I appreciate you coming here every month, and that you have a written, you know, portion in a packet that people can see and find out those facts. And I'm hoping that in the coming months when we have this cow, that we're going to bring all of our providers, because Mark is incredible. I've known him for many years, and his heart, I mean, don't ever say he doesn't care. You can never say that about Mark. And I think that we need to come together and say, we all need to work together and row in the same way, because we're just doing circles by people rowing in different ways. But I thank you for your work, and I appreciate that you can come and publicly give us the facts, because that's what we all need to start with. We all need the same set of facts. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree. I also appreciate that. And I think that I appreciate the feedback about Christmas. There was a lot of misconceptions there. You know, and I think this narrative that had been playing out for a while, that, you know, that somehow it was incumbent upon the mayor to start opening up public buildings and you know, holding shelter there when our shelters had room, you know, is perhaps a little bit of a false narrative. And I think it's good to get an update every month from you, because you are our boots on the ground. And, you know, I think as a committee, it's incumbent upon us to support you in that role and know what's going well and what's going poorly. And if there's things that we can facilitate to make it go better, that's exactly what we do here. And that's why I was saying last week at council that all of the homelessness discussion really has been centered in this committee, because that's really where it lives. And so we're having this discussion on a cyclical monthly basis so that we can figure out like where those gaps are. And if we have a role to play in filling the gap, we'll fill it. But, you know, we also are one seat at that table with a number of agencies that actually do the work as well. And so it's certainly not incumbent upon local units of government to solve this problem alone, because we never will. We just can't. And so working with our partners, though, I think we're making some good progress. Lou?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to echo those thoughts, you know, because I think somehow through the news media or whatever media, the public got misinformation. I mean, we were prepared. You just said the shelters weren't full. And as I said to Alder Rasmussen before this meeting, it feels like that, you know, we're getting the brunt of stuff because of things weren't done to protect, well, things were done, you know. But where is all this stuff coming from, the media and stuff? And I just want to say one other thing. I too am looking forward to this cow meeting, because I'm open for ideas, you know, and I definitely hope somebody from the county is here, because I have made on more than one instance say that we've got a building, we've got the former UW dormitory building sitting there empty. You know, why can't we put that to some kind of use? You know, obviously it was good enough to hold college kids. Why can't we use that as a transitional center for homeless? You know, but we can't do it on our own. We need partners. you know, so we need the county to step up and help too, and so, but thank you for all you do.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I think our task force also meets again tomorrow morning. The task force will be meeting over at CPC campus, and we're going to tour that facility. So that is always a constructive conversation. Tracy's there, I'm there, the mayor's there, and a lot of the agencies that do the work. And the meeting is run by Ben Lee, who also runs United Way. And so as a funder of a number of those same agencies, he really provides a central point of contact for us all to network with one another and, you know, figure out what the next steps are, you know, along this journey that we're all seem to be walking together. So, does anybody else have any questions for Tracy? Okay, well, thank you so much for that
You're
report.
welcome.
So, and I'll say I also appreciate the police chief's comments at the last council meeting as well, where we talked a little bit about homelessness and what we're actually seeing out there. And it's important, I think, like Becky said, that we get accurate facts to people, because the opportunity for information to go off the rails in a hurry is constant and it's daily. So, you know, I do hope that people who are interested in solutions for homelessness and what we're doing and what we're going to be doing and what we are planning and what's already been deployed, I hope that folks tune into these meetings and watch the conversations that we have here and see the work that has come out of all of this effort, because, you know, just even in the investment of ARPA dollars, whether it's low-income housing initiatives, whether it's getting Tracy on board, whether it's, you know, stopgap measures, you know, things that we've had to do even just to get our arms around the situation, it's been huge, and it's more than what we've seen historically for a number of terms. So I'm excited about the fact that we can, you know, I had said last Tuesday, we're finally at this table with some money behind us. And, you know, we always would get together at the task force and we had great, friendly, robust conversations about how to save people and how to get things moving. But you know, the city was never at the table with money. And so thank you to that ARPA allocation that we got. We were finally able to come to that table with some money and make some progress. So that's been a big help for us. Does anybody else have anything on that subject? Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I guess just maybe a counter viewpoint here is when it hit minus 12 degrees, I think people naturally heighten their sense of, you know, concern for those living outdoors. So it, on top of actual concern, there was a potential then for some misinformation. So we probably missed out on a communication piece here. And somebody else got ahead of us on the communication. So we need to communicate correctly what's going on, and then communicate correctly for those that may be in a spot where how do we take care of them? How do they get help? And I saw a lot of alders, shouldn't say a lot, a few alders posting links to different things, but that's not a communication plan. It really needs to come from the city or from the PD or from fire. But it maybe just something to think
Or
about.
the agency, and also the agencies that actually do the work, you know,
True,
and I think
true.
that's where, you know, the opportunity exists to make sure that people know what their options are if they are in crisis and if they need that help, because it really our first duty is to them. But then there also is a huge opportunity for misinformation. And, you know, I will say that I do value the donor effort that was undertaken on Christmas to secure money for hotel rooms. Those people meant well. They sprang into action. They provided funds quickly and easily. They were able to get nights for people that needed nights. And even sometimes, though there is conflict between agencies and between, you know, well-meaning citizens and whatever, the fact remains is that weekend, the entire community came together. And whether that process appeared to be, you know, a little clunky in how it gets together, it sometimes is a little bit like herding cats, because you have people from, you know, a number of different agencies, and yet they got together and they did what they needed to do, and people got services they needed. And, you know, it was inspiring to see people come together around a common cause, you know, and in a world that is as divisive as ours has become, to see people come together to help other people is what it's really about. And so, you know, I certainly thank those agencies for their efforts. And even though the shelters weren't full, whatever barriers there might have been, if there were people that didn't quite fit the mold that needed a hotel room, they were able to get one. Thank heavens for that. So, you know, I think that's, you know, where we need to go. But accurate communication is job one. You're right on that, Becky.
And I also wanted to make sure people know that our police officers are there to help. They're not there to criminalize. They are, you know, we had checked with Chad the sheriff.
Philip,
We checked,
yep.
yeah, Philip, we checked with, our dispatch, and anybody that needs a ride, they get a ride to wherever they need to go. No questions asked. I guess I think that, we will probably hopefully develop this more in a cow, but those are some things that I have. There were a ton of emails being thrown around over that weekend specifically, and a lot of accusations that were just not true. It's like people had, the police were out looking. They had people, places to go. If they don't, I know of police officers take people from place to place. Will you take them? They don't just say, well, sorry. That doesn't happen in this community. Let's not, again, pointing fingers. I know what was done and I know what was happening, and that's great. I also want to know that there were no alders that called or emailed me that weekend. So I guess, I was doing that, and I had maybe one community member, but I don't know of any links that were done by alders, because they certainly weren't in contact with the mayor nor me. So we just need to work together and get this, if there's gaps, we can work on that. But again, we're not going to have the silver bullet, one size fits all. There is no such thing in this situation. And we need the police, we need the fire, we need all of us to work together. I too felt people really came together. And I know that the organizations work together. Mark called Open Door person. I saw the emails, they called Open Door. Hey, we ran out of volunteers, can you open earlier? That all was being done on the fly, boots on the ground. So we should be proud of that and tout that as we do have a functioning system within this community, and look to strengthen that instead of let's remake the wheel.
Well, and sometimes it is a case-by-case situation as well. I mean, there was a report from that, same time period where the police department was working with one particular individual who was not a fit for the options that were available, and they ended up funding a hotel stay just to get that person off the street and get them warmed up, and that's huge. I mean, that just really speaks to the spirit of caring that everyone has that's involved in all of this. As a task force member, I can tell you one of the things that we had been talking about in the task force, and I'm sure we'll talk about a little more tomorrow, is the standing up of this day center that we all have wanted to fund. And, as far as the location, but we've also talked about the fact that that does need to be a lower barrier entry, or it's not going to be successful, because if there's too many roadblocks, people aren't going to come. And so we've had some discussion around that, and I know that that's going to be one of their frontiers that they start to work on. So with that, I guess if there's no other comment about the outreach update or the situation that we're addressing there, I will take a motion. Oh, communications is item 11. I have none. Does anyone have any communications? Okay, if not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Hinkie, second by Denny.
I'll give you one.
Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No one ever is. We'll stand adjourned then. Thanks, everyone.